I've always thought the Nissan 300zx was one of those 90s Japanese cars that never got the credit it deserved. I built this Z out of scrap, and in this video, I plan to make it one of my favorite cars to drive. In case you're new to the channel, my name is Mike, and I'm addicted to saving cool cars from getting junked. This is my 1996 Nissan 300zx. I've always had a dream of owning a 300zx Z32, and I've always wanted to see if I can drift one. Unfortunately, the term drift car gets a bad name. Many people think of missiles, mismatched panels, or just absolute junk. So I guess what I wanted to build is the perfect street drift car. Something that could be welcomed into a car show and still get down on track. I bought this car as a shell and have built it into my liking the past few years. It started off as a budget build. I searched through junkyards to find a drivetrain for it. It currently has a junkyard KA that I pulled out of an S13 paired to a Z32 transmission, which I also found in the junkyard. In this video, I want to focus more on getting the driving aspect dialed in. Previously, I had converted the front suspension to utilize the 240SX S13 geometry, which is McPherson. My goal was to make it drive and feel like an S13 would. And because this 300zx has a KA in it instead of a heavy VG, it already feels significantly lighter. The car is currently sitting on stance coils paired with PBM drop knuckles. There's also an S13 lower control arm. I figured the more S13 parts I can utilize on this 300zx, the closer it would feel to an S13. Now this chassis still has the factory 300zx Z32 front subframe and steering rack. The car handles great overall, but it could be better. There's only two concerns I have with drivability. Most importantly, I was having this problem where when the car was nearing full lock, the steering wheel would not auto center, which usually is a caster or alignment concern. Secondly, when I used the handbrake to adjust or extend the drift, the power steering assist would fade. After some research, I found the factory Z32 rack is power assisted, based on rear wheel speed. My hopeful solution is to convert a 240SX S13 subframe and rack and pinion to fit the Z32. It's pretty common for 90s Nissans to accept different subframes from other chassis. However, the Z32 is specific to Z32, meaning no other subframe will fit this chassis. My goal today is to either convert an S13 subframe to fit the Z32 or convert the Z32 dimensions to work like an S13. I begin with shaking down the suspension just to verify that everything is tight. I noticed some play in the rack. Is that normal? I'm not sure. Everything seems tight. Now let's look at the problem area. I currently have rack spacers, which are known to prematurely fail the rack. I'd like to remove these during the swap. Now I'm taking note of how close the inner tie rod is to the lower control arm, as this is important for steering geometry. Usually on S chassis, the rack gets relocated forward, and those rack offset spacers mimic what relocating the rack mounts do. Now unfortunately, I could not relocate the rack forward because I had to move the subframe backwards to fit the KA oil pan. The 300zx is designed to fit a rear sump and the KA is a front sump, meaning that the oil pickup tube is in front of the subframe versus behind. So I had to convert the subframe to fit the KA pan, which brings me back to the initial issue of trying to fit an S chassis subframe into the Z32. At this point, I'm measuring the distance between the lower control arm mount versus the tension arm mount. Then I also wanted to do the overall height of the subframe, even the depth of which the control arm sits in the subframe, and I want to compare this to an S chassis. I had to get my swag on real quick, my bad guys. Now I'm not planning on pulling the engine here, I just want to take the tension off of the motor mounts, that way I can begin disconnecting the subframe from the chassis. So we got a few parts to work on here, got the control arms, tension arms, and inner tie rods. I've always found this tool to be useful for taking off inner tie rods. It looks like an old school exhaust clamp, but it works like a charm. Suspension is fully removed. Now we can start looking at the power steering lines. This is actually an S13 power steering line, which utilizes an adapter fitting. Now the return side on the Z32 utilizes a banjo bolt with 2 crush washers. The S13 pressure line adapter actually seals through a rubber O-ring, but I found out in a recent video that it seals better with using a crush washer. And this is the plug for the rack. Isn't it weird that you have to plug it in? Next I gotta take off the steering shaft. I also wanted to take note of the angle at which the steering shaft gets put out. That way I can compare it to an S chassis. Next we'll remove the motor mount nuts, and I always like to keep all my hardware near jack stands, that way I can keep track of it. The subframe is ready to be removed. We have tension on the hoist, I'll just impact it off. Now we'll carefully remove the subframe. Well, I guess that motor mount was bad. It just split right off. wasn't even connected to the subframe. Now we get to compare the two subframes side by side with the rack and pinion. However, I think I want to remove the power steering lines off of the S chassis subframe first. And I'm quickly realizing everything is different. I'm planning on test mounting the S13 subframe without the rack. That way I can see how it sits in the chassis. It looks like the S chassis steering shaft mount points a little higher up, whereas the Z32 one is pretty laid back. We've got some notable differences in the angle at which the engine mount sits. Looking at it straight across like this, the engine mounts are actually not parallel. Looks like this one sits farther back, whereas the S chassis mounts appear to be even. It also looks like the overall height of the Z32 subframe is higher. Since there's so many differences, I think what I'm going to focus on first is taking off the rack and pinions and seeing how the dimensions of this S chassis subframe fits in the Z. Because yet another difference is the distance between the mounting holes to the frame rails. I did make some custom motor mounts to make the KA fit into the Z32 subframe, and then I utilized Z32 engine mounts. Now while I do this, I figured it would be a good idea to put the factory S13 engine brackets and KA motor mounts onto my KA. That way I can see where it lines up in comparison. After installing the S13 subframe directly to the motor mounts, I'm realizing, wow, this does not fit at all. There's over an inch gap to the frame rail mounts, and the entire subframe is sitting significantly farther back. This is going to be an interesting job. So let's pull up an S chassis and compare. I'm going to take the same measurements that I took on the Z32 and then compare. This S13 is bone stock, so it's a great example to use. And I come to the same conclusion. Everything is different. The overall height of the Z32 subframe is significantly different. The depth at which the lower control arm mounts to the subframe is different. The width of the rack mounts are different. There is not one dimension that is the same between these two. While everything's apart, I might as well spray it off and spend the next 2 or 3 days just thinking about a game plan. Oh, and remodeling the garage. I've given myself some time to think about what I want to do. I've taken a few measurements and I've decided that I want to relocate the lower control arm mounts on the subframe, moving the lower control arm further back to where it would sit on an S13. I'm hoping that this will fix one of my main issues, the caster concern. Both of my tension arms are completely maxed out. Will moving the control arm mounts backwards give my tension arms the ability to have more adjustment? Will I be able to increase my caster? I begin chopping up the subframe, and at this point there's no turning back. I drew up a little diagram with some measurements, that way I can stay on task. I mount an old control arm to the subframe mounts, that way I can keep everything in the correct location. I am measuring about 1 inch of a relocation. However, I end up doing 3/4 of an inch. I also used a gauge thicker than the factory steel used on the subframe. Got some paint laid on her, let it sit overnight to dry, and now it's the next day and we're ready to throw this thing together. Now I really wanted to utilize the S13 rack, however I felt like that would maybe add too many variables. So for now I'm just going to take off the rack spacers and reinstall the Z32 rack and pinion. If I can't figure out the power steering issue, then maybe I'll go ahead and swap the S13 rack in later. I fully installed the subframe, custom motor mounts, tension arm brackets, lower control arms, and now we're left with the steering shaft. This is super fun. Now before you reattach the steering shaft, you want to confirm that your rack is centered, which basically means make sure the rack is coming out even on both sides. This tension arm is currently fully maxed in. cannot have any more adjustment. When I place it on top of the control arm now, you can see now I have to extend this arm to fit. I have high hopes that this will be successful. We've got everything installed. I did a quick eyeball alignment. We'll throw some wheels on and maybe just take it around the block and see how it does. I'm very excited. First of all, I'm impressed with the eyeball alignment. The car drives perfectly straight. The steering wheel is straight as well. Now what we're looking for is for the steering wheel to auto-correct back to center. Before, the issue was when I would turn more than 80%, the steering wheel would continue to turn in that same direction and then stay there. Let's start in full lock. Now we're still rolling, right? And I'm holding the steering wheel. I'm gonna let go, and it's starting to correct. We're gonna crash here. So that's already an improvement. Wow, I'm very impressed actually. All the way right. Ooh. Dude, feels good. It's never done that before. Before, if I was turning, it would go like this. And then it would stay like that. It was so weird. It also feels like it has more angle. You know, that could be a thing because moving the lower control arm back puts the inner and outer tie rod closer to the knuckle, which makes that pivot point tighter. So we might have gained some angle in this swap as well. I'm impressed with no alignment though. This is pretty straight. But we'll get it aligned and get all the settings dialed in. But needless to say, this was worth it. And I'm shocked that it works. I did not think moving the control arm mounts backwards 3/4 of an inch would correct steering geometry. But all I tried to do was match the dimensions of the S13 and it worked. Ready to get some laps in though.
Big brain activities.
Big brain activities. All right, let's take some pictures of it here. This is a good monumental moment. Is this our new picture spot?
I think so.
Should
Look,
we
they
do,
left
like,
us some tape here.
Center on the pole, forward of the pole?
Let me see how it looks inside the car. And make sure I don't hit the curb. Right there is perfect.
It's time to make it official. Let's get a real alignment and some hard numbers. The car drove better overall, and I know my eyes are pretty straight, but nothing beats putting it on a rack and seeing what's up. We visited our homie Israel that works at a local Firestone, and they have this really nice in-ground rack that you can drive up on. It's low car friendly. However, I left my bumper off just in case. He even mounts the sensors with zip ties. Using the original mounts could damage the fender when doing a caster sweep. I was also having some starter issues, so while Israel is getting the machine set up and dialed in, I'm gonna look into what's going on down here. This is the original readout. Look at that, dead on one side. So close. Now Israel can finally increase the caster since we have some adjustment left in the tension arm. I'm getting the starter put in. I'm really hoping it works this time. Our alignment values are getting closer. However, we're still going to be safe and do another caster sweep just to re-rack it, make sure everything's straight. And we're looking good. I think I'm happy with those results. Looks like we got another bad starter. Gotta love it. We'll load this thing up and figure it out later. Got our alignment sheet. We're all specced out. Here's our before and after. Mostly green. Let's see how the steering handles now. I really wish I filmed a before of all of this, but you just have to take my word for it. It was horrible. Full lock. We got some self-steer. It's better. And it's even. I think we also have a slight rub now. I don't know. The only way we're going to figure out if this really worked is drifting it. So hopefully we can do that soon. Good news, I was able to figure out the starter situation. It had a weird spring, and then that spring and plunger had to sit a certain way on this hook inside the starter. I don't know, I've never seen anything like this. Have you guys seen something like this before? And I was able to throw it on the car last night, so now it just does what it did originally. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In a recent video, I discovered that this was because the ignition switch was faulty. So annoying. At least it starts the car. We're not pushing it around town anymore. I'm hoping we have the caster issue figured out. Let's begin the second issue, the inconsistency in the power steering. My plan here is to back probe the connector that connects to the power steering rack. Then I can hook up the multimeter to the plug and monitor the voltages while driving. I'm hoping it won't make a difference with the car being in the air, considering that there's no load on the rack. Oh, looks like it's on AC. Make sure it's on DC for cars. 5.8 volts. I'm gonna turn the wheel a bit and see if it does anything. Not seeing any change, so I think I'm gonna put it on the ground and see if that does anything. It's getting a consistent 5.8 volts. I was hoping it would be 12 volts so I can just jump 12 volts to it at all times. You've heard of boost gauges, but have you heard of power steering gauges? Yeah, it's still at about 6 volts while rolling. Oh, no assist. That goes down to like 1 volt. See, that's where the inconsistency comes in. So it's at 1 volt. I'll move forward like an inch. Now that it sees I'm rolling, 6 volts gets applied. I wonder if I can find a voltage reducer or something. I'm planning on driving the car at US Air for season closer. Unfortunately, they do not allow coolant on track. So we're gonna have to drain all the coolant out and replace it with water. While I was under the car, I figured I might as well do an oil change as well. I used this K&N HP 3001 filter because it's oversized and holds more oil than factory. I use the VR1 oil by Valvoline. I also like to add water wetter to the mix, or in this case, super coolant. This additive doesn't contain anything that would protect it from freezing solid. This just increases the boiling point like coolant would, except it's not coolant. With this drift event coming up, I need to replace some tires on my Model 6s. These are 18 by 10 plus 24. These fit absolutely perfect on the rear of the 300zx. No spacer required. I like to put on a 235/40/18 Accelera 651. The main thing I look for in tires is if it chunks up mid-drift. These seem to burn pretty consistently. I dig them. The voltage reducer I ordered showed up. Let's figure out this power steering issue. This device will convert the 12 volt system into a 6 volt output. However, I wanted to recheck the voltages at the rack. I realized I didn't hook up the test leads correctly to the system. There should have only been one lead on the positive side of the connector and the other lead should have been grounded. After a retest, I'm getting 13 volts, which proves my theory. So I didn't need a voltage reducer after all. And my plan here is to make a 12 volt switched circuit. I like to use these fuse jumpers that go into fuse boxes. I always make sure to throw it into a fuse slot that I'm not using. And in this case, it's ABS. I wanted to utilize the cruise control switch, but I don't think I have the time to make it work. So just a simple on-off switch will do for now. All right, moment of truth. Let's see if the power steering works. Gotta love the 300zx starter. The switch is currently off. No power steering. Oh, power steering! This is very exciting. I guess 12 volts was the correct rating. Seems to be working just fine. Damn, just on a switch like that? Assist on and off? Yep, now it's off. Now it's on. Oh, that's good. That is good. We can finally put this car back together. What do you got there?
Chicken Alfredo.
Oh my God. At this point, I'm ready to put the car to the test. Let's see if all the work we did was worth it. I'm starting with the rear tire pressure at 40 psi. I plan to lower it throughout the day as I get more comfortable in the car. There's 3 different courses at US Air. Beginner, which is a skid pad, intermediate, and advanced. I'm gonna start with the skid pad just to verify the basics. I want to do a couple figure eights around these two cones just to make sure that we have accurate center steer. Got our power steering on. Everything seems to be working fine. This is going to be the first ultimate test. I set up a GoPro to film in-car footage, and to my surprise, it died instantly.
Let's see if she works.
GoPro batteries are not to be trusted. Shout out to Tay for the out-of-car footage, though.
How is that?
I mean, it works, but it's definitely not centering how I'd like it to.
I see.
I decide to move on. Let's test our luck on intermediate. Well, actually, the line looks a little too long. Let's just head straight to advanced and test our luck. Now, they call this course advanced because there's a lot of blind corners. The elevation varies so much that you cannot even see what's ahead. This track requires the driver to be in tune with their car. Needless to say, it was not going as expected. This could be a mix of driver error, considering I haven't driven this course in over a year. However, I did notice a few times I was having the same issues I did before. During a few transitions, I realized the steering wheel was not correcting. I thought I had fixed my caster issue. I'm glad I was able to capture the issue happening. So here you can see I'm initiating a transition and let go of the steering wheel. And the steering wheel does not move at all. Normally the steering wheel would spin by itself, thanks to caster. I tried my best to save the drift by steering into it. However, it was too late and I spun out. I'm already here at the track. I'm just going to make the best of my day. So I continue to drive. It seems to handle a lot better on intermediate course. Sometimes there's no issue at all. Other times the steering wheel does not move whatsoever. It's very inconsistent and I cannot trust this car. Despite the issues I may be having, I'm reminded it could always be worse. I may have discovered something a little unusual. While we were out to lunch, I realized I forgot to put the power steering back on. Now this is with the steering on, right? And it's low assist, not ideal. But I realized while the assist was off, I go center a lot faster. Let's do a few laps with the power steering off and see if that fixes our root issue.
Damn.
I think. It's still alright. Fuck. That's fixable. Dude, that was such a good lap too. It was worth it.
He's like, I hope my skirt's still intact. I'm like, it's not the skirt.
Damn. Yeah, I need to check it out. They ripped it off. Hey, to this day, I have still never lost a bumper off of the car. It's still on the car, right? That counts.
That's it, man.
Hey, at least it's still in one piece.
That's not even that bad.
I like how I come around the corner and you're like, that's not even that bad, as it's like pretzel.
Well, it's not cracked in half. You got a little bit missing here, but
Yeah.
to be doing cool stuff.
That's right. It could be worse. It could be a lot worse. I want to scratch the paint, so we're going to use some McGuire's detail. Hopefully we can wipe this scratch away. Some of the dirt. Oh, I didn't realize this too. We'll get her fixed up in no time.
It's just fiberglass.
This is season closer after all, meaning this is the last drift event of the year, so we have all winter to get this thing dialed in again. Who knew? All I had to do was unplug the rack to get better force feedback to the steering wheel. My guess is the steering assist was fighting the caster correction. I'm glad I took the time to figure out the caster concern and relocate the control arm mounts. Once the steering assist was off, the Z felt just like my S13, which was my initial goal. This chassis is now ready to evolve. I've left the boost levels at 5 psi until I was confident in the rest of the chassis. Perhaps a built engine next? It is technically the off-season now. This was a fun learning experience. I hope this helps someone, someday, with whatever project they're working on. Your project car will only be as good as you make it. How bad do you want it?
I don't know. Does he approve this?
I don't know.
I don't know.
We'll have to see.
We'll find out.